Israeli apartheid walls. They have, like, you know, the way you do saints and heroes. They have Sheikh Yassin, a mass murderer who killed 387, was responsible for the murders of 387 civilians individually or in small groups, not all at once. Why wouldn't you, if you are friends with somebody, say, well, what do you think about that? Wouldn't you condemn that or dissociate yourself from Israeli Apartheid Week? But the Muslim Students Association it's a recruitment organization, so it's mainly religious and cultural. The more aggressive, and they always work hand in glove, organization is Students for Justice in Palestine. What they do is they get the kids who they see have potential to move up in the Brotherhood. In that pamphlet, there's a page in which it lists what the careers of, I think it's 9 former presidents of Muslim Students Associations, who all went on to leadership positions in Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations. The most famous one being Anwar al-Awlaki, who was the MSA president at Colorado State. Now, we're not talking about somebody who came in to pray. We're talking about somebody who was elevated to be president of the organization. When I was attacked by Hillel on this campus last year, I did some research and I looked at the Muslim Students Association site. It's all pretty much, it's all religious and cultural. But then they have a summer training program. So I would call a cadre training program. All of the instructors came to teach the class that they were giving to their students were members of the Islamic Society of North America, which is a brotherhood front.
Yep.
So it's very sinister. I mean, when I grew up, you know, my parents, they were communists, but I never heard that word pass their lips. They were progressives. That's the way they described themselves. My mother actually was a registered Democrat. When I was a kid, I joined a communist organization that was called Young Progressives of America. The official slogan of the Communist Party at the time was peace, jobs, and democracy. This is in the days of Stalin. So people are not stupid. They understand, you know, they have an agenda. They want to recruit people and they want to do it behind closed doors. And they don't want to alienate people, so they say nice things. Now, the unfortunate thing about Islam is that it's a religious obligation in Islam to lie to infidels, which is almost all of us. Maybe all of us, I don't know. All right.
Oh, sure. Well, Dr. Horowitz, if your parents were communists and you're where you are, and my dad had a shrine to Reagan in our summer home, and I'm a graduate student at Carolina, I'm hoping we can maybe find the middle ground somewhere.
Uh-oh, have you gone the other way?
I reserve judgments. I'm a desperate moderate, but let's posit a hypothetical. Now, I'm an American citizen and not a Jew. However, my neighbors all through summer times growing up on all 3 sides of me were Jews, were the most wonderful people. Well, as good a neighbors as you can ask, let me in and watch me and my brothers when my parents were away. I cannot pretend to have the emotional attachment or the investment in the state of Israel that Jewish Americans have, or the Jews worldwide. I do, however, want to bracket history for a minute and just get your response to a hypothetical situation. Let's say the American military strategic command political apparatus basically says the maintenance of the state of Israel is militarily, demographically untenable. Okay? And let's assume that the America of 2012 is not the America of 1948, and that we could organize as a nation the complete import of every Israeli citizen that wanted to this country to become full refugee status citizens of this country. Hold on. Here's the hypothetical of that.
Okay.
And so let's pretend that can go on as a proposal. Because here's the deal as an American taxpayer and citizen. After 2 wars, in Iraq and in Afghanistan, not paid for, wars meant to change the world, by the way. I am no longer willing, as a taxpayer, to support expeditionary armed conflicts around the world when my one and primary concern with the Middle East is getting the resource we all need and depend on, which is cheap oil. So I'm wondering if that solution was proposed, whether it would be a tenable or doable situation.
Okay. I think it's a reasonable question, but I like when you said desperate, because it's a desperate idea. First of all, we can get cheap oil. Is cheap oil drill? I believe that I've written a book on this. It's called Party of Defeat, and it would be another lecture. But America, I think the Iraq War was mismanaged by the Bush administration. They never made up their minds whether they were going to occupy or not, and so forth. But the reason that it's such a mess, and the reason that the Middle East is now Muslim Brotherhood Middle East, is because the Democrats betrayed this country, our troops in the field, and sabotaged that war. And they did it for the worst, most venal reasons. They supported the war. They voted for the war. They gave eloquent speeches on the floor of the House and the Senate for the war. But then a lefty, Howard Dean, was going to win the Democratic primary, and that's when Kerry and Edwards and several others flipped. And that was only 3 months into the war. We had troops in the field. They attacked the commander-in-chief, not as a loyal opposition, not as Americans, where you have a bipartisan foreign policy. They attacked them the way you do in the psychological warfare manuals, which I read for doing this book. And in the manual, it says the first thing you do is you attack the moral character of the opposing commander. Bush lied, people died. Why did they say Bush lied? They said Bush lied because they could not explain to the American people why they would reverse themselves 180 degrees when the war had just been won. The only explanation they could give is that Bush lied to them about intelligence. But that was the big lie of the war. Why? Because the Democrats sit on all the intelligence committees and have total access to American intelligence, and not to let the Republicans off. What the hell were they doing not fighting back and not saying this? They walk around on eggshells where Democrats, when Democrats betray and get our troops killed, which is what they did, by the New York Times, 60 pages, 60 front pages on Abu Ghraib. 60 front pages. In the entire Second World War, while the Jews were being eliminated.
You're not answering my question.
Excuse me. I'm answering both parts of your question. I'll answer a third part. The first part was how do we get cheap oil?
I'm Israeli. I'm not going to let my country down. I'm Israeli. Is that your question? No, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, but
we're going to go give the Indian people the country back.
The first
California to Mexico back. It's not going to happen.
The first answer.
Better.
The first answer was, we can drill here, that's where you get cheap oil. The second one was your frustration for failed wars. You take that to the Democratic Party. You can also take it to Republicans. But the Democrats are the prime culprits. It's not an accident that Jimmy Carter brought the Ayatollah to power, and Obama has brought the Muslim Brotherhood to power in the Middle East. Same mentality, same operational principles. The third thing is, even if you extricated every Jew from Israel and brought them here, you will still have you will still have the Islamic jihad against the West, and they will pursue it until they are defeated.
I want to respond to the previous speaker. Yes, my question is, who do you think really paid for this war, or that war? In 1945, I set off a booby trap on Okinawa. I helped pay for winning World War II. In just a minute. Fortunately for me, the booby trap didn't go off. Clearly, or I wouldn't be here. The people who are paying for the war are not these suckers who have money enough to pay the taxes to support the war. It's the damn victims who are sent over there to risk their lives and go crazy. Now, what does that have to do with tonight? I would have never been in World War II. There would have never been a World War II. If Hitler had been stopped when he said what he was going to do and proceeded to do it, are we going to have any battle or confrontation with Iran? The question is, are we going to do it now, or are we going to do it when they're a lot stronger, as Hitler was allowed to do?
So, changing the subject a little bit, to culture. You had mentioned culture. And you had said it's all about culture. And I agree with you. Okay?
You're a conservative.
But what are we doing about culture? You've come on, you've talked about the campus, you've talked about, well, just let me finish my question, please, sir. You've talked about the campus, the problems on the campus. I don't disagree with any of it, okay? But it's one thing to talk about the problems, it's another thing to talk about the solution to the problems. Now, are there any students here from the School of Journalism? Wonderful. Okay? So are we going after what is the biggest influence of culture, American society? Well, who are the biggest deniers of this country being a Judeo-Christian country, being founded on principles and wanting to change those principles? I say it's our media, I say it's our journalists, I say it's the people not telling the citizens of this country the truth, and I think that originates in schools of journalism and journalistic ethics.
I spent the last 7 years attempting to get universities to adopt an academic Bill of Rights. And my purpose was very simple. It was that there should be two sides of every question fairly presented. That's it. That the professor was there to teach students how to think, not to tell them what to think. And I was pretty lonely in this battle. So I've given my, it was a very modest solution, but I think it would have had a big impact. It's like, I was just thinking, when you say this is a Judeo-Christian country, there are people who will hear that as saying, as intolerant towards non-Judeo-Christian faiths or to atheists. I know that you didn't mean that, but I'm just telling you. So it's always important. That's why it's important to have a dialogue. I think the schools, and it's not just universities. I mean, these kids are already brainwashed when they get to college. The K-12 schools are terrible. The same way. I went through 20 years of education. I never once, not once, had a teacher or a professor reveal what his political views were.